You mentioned Millie in the single "My Boy Lollipop." One of the things that you did with that was take it from, correct me if I'm wrong, but take it from Jamaica and then make a deal with Philips to sort of help you bring it broader. For young people starting their careers, maybe they've signed some artists. How important is it to partner with people, and what are the virtues and the dangers of potentially going to a distributor, going to a larger label? What do you gain and what do you give up?
Well, my situation was a little, I'll just explain it a little bit, because you see, I started in Jamaica, and then when independence came in Jamaica, I'd been going a couple of years, and I had produced quite a few records that had done well in Jamaica. They'd done very well in Jamaica, and part of the reason they did well was because they were the first records by Jamaicans for Jamaicans. Yeah. So people really were responding well to their own making records. Right. So by 1962, I was selling more records in England to the Jamaican community in England than I was selling in Jamaica, because my records were starting to, quote, sound better, sound cleaner, sound prettier and everything, but they were selling less to the Jamaican audience.
I see.
While the other guys, the sound system guys, Coxsone, Duke Reed, Leslie Kong, all these other guys were making records which didn't sound so prissy as mine had started to sound, and just were raw and rough and sounded, and those were what was really catching. So then, with independence, that means when Jamaica got its independence from the British, two things really. One is that I was selling more in England, and two, the general wave of feeling at that time is, okay, now Jamaican for Jamaicans. And the way I'm packaged, I'm more identified with English than Jamaican. So I thought, well, I'll go to England. And I was friends with pretty much all my competitors. So I made deals with them for me to release their records in England. So when I went to England, I produced very little and just released records from all these different guys. And Island Records was a very hot company in just the Jamaican field. I never sent any records to newspapers to be reviewed because they wouldn't review. I never sent them to the radio, they wouldn't play them. So if I manufactured 6,221, I sold 6,221, and none given away. But that was a very tight market. So when I did this record with Millie and it was finished, it just sounded like it could be a huge hit.
Cross outside of the niche that you had established.
Right. So, but I did have a company, you see. So I always had the option, when I was talking to anybody else, I had the option that I could put it out on my own label. My own label was there, it was working.
You weren't reliant upon anyone else.
Right. So I made a deal with, it was Philips at the time, which became Polygram, etc. And I made a deal with them for just that record with, I think, a couple options. I can't remember what now. But what also traditionally would happen is, for independence, is if the business that we did, you could last forever on that. You have your market, you know what you're selling. You might make a little mistake, you're not going to make a huge mistake. But if you had a hit, you would never get paid. You see, if people are used to doing business with you and paying you $1,000 a month, $1,200 one month, $700 one month, but it just varies like that, and suddenly they have to pay you $10,000, they're not going to pay you that $10,000, right? Because they're waiting to see what else you're going to have later on. Right. In the meantime, you have to pay your pressing
manufacturing
plant
costs
and your manufacturing plant. So certainly in those early years, the 50s, it happened with a lot of American record companies. When I saw that happen, and so that's sort of why I licensed it, because I didn't want it to happen to me. Because you'd have a big hit, and then go out of business.
Well, and I think that happens frequently today too with independent labels. They have this kind of aberration, this thing that takes them out of their market, and they never recover from that.
Right.
You know, the hit is worse than the failure.
Right.
So you were smart enough to realize that and kind of give yourself the support of having Phillips to do your collection. They're going to pay
Right.
Phillips, right? Is that the
Right.
bottom line?
But the difference where you're saying is talking about a student. In my case, I had a label.
Yes.
You see what I mean? So I could speak a little bit from strength because I wasn't going and begging them. I was going and saying, well, look, I'm bringing you a hit because it's too... And the people, to give them their due, recognized that, you know, it sounded like a hit record.
So, you know, one of the many lessons in that statement is that you had built something on your own,
right,
that then allowed you to have that freedom,
correct,
rather than just trying to come out of the gates, have some artist, have no company, and just try and make a deal.
Right.
I say to all my students, you know, the more you bring to a label, the less they can take away.
Right.
And that can be from an artist perspective, or if you're trying to do some sort of joint deal with the label. What are the downsides of doing those deals? I mean, you faced a larger downside, I suppose, with Polygram when you sold Island to them.
Well, when I sold Island, it's like you're selling a house. You know, you're moving out of your home, and you can't really then tell the people how to decorate it anymore. Mm-hmm. But when you do joint ventures, when you do deals with labels, it's very risky because you get into so much politics that exists in all corporations. So it depends who's really made the deal. And then, you know, you may make a deal with somebody, and by the time your record comes out, the person's gone. That's the first. Right. That is death.
And that can happen to bands too. You know, mm-hmm. You get signed by an A&R person, and that person is gone before your record comes out.
Well, that's a big problem. Yeah. Because it's not in anybody's interest there to make you successful. Right. Unfortunately, the politics of it, that's how it works. Right. The other danger is that you are a stepchild. Mm. You're not, when I talk about you as that is like as an artist or as a producer of an artist or as a label who represents the artist. You're a kind of stepchild of the label. So you're not really that label's artist. Mm. You know, there's a couple of stages before. So only when that becomes very successful are you then sort of included, yes. Because then you're proved to be a moneymaker, and then once you're a moneymaker, you become very popular overnight. Wow. But until that point in time, you're a kind of a stepchild, and you're not going to get any particular push because it's not on that label. Right. I mean, a label which I always avoid doing any business with was a label actually that I most respected, which was Columbia Records. Columbia. I love Columbia Records. That
Bob
was
Dylan, Miles Davis.
Yeah, they had literally the top of the line in every field. So I felt there was no space for me there anyhow. There's nothing I can really bring to the table there.
You would always be a stepchild in that situation.
Yeah, and in fact there was never a label that was launched through Columbia that ever did any good.
That's interesting.
Because everybody right down to this local salespeople, Columbia Records. It was like a religion.